Hello, I'm Paul Mackey, this time with intro music, and you're listening to the One Idjit's Thoughts on podcast. This is day 22 of the Dog Days of Podcasting Challenge, and once again, I'm back with the Dog Days of Trivia. After this episode, there are 9 more official Dog Days episodes, and I'm hoping to have my poop in a group adequately that you may hear me one more time before the mega feed from dogdaysofpodcasting.com goes back into storage until December. I also have the promised other episode of the Seeing Things and Press Gang pairing today. But first, let's get you to some answers about unbelievable apparel. Shirts were developed with embedded micropellets containing thermochromic dye in 1991, allowing them to change color dependent on the temperature of the fabric. That trade name was Hypercolor. Between February and May of 1991, the parent company Genera sold $50 million in Hypercolor products, but declared bankruptcy the next year due to the end of the fad and mismanagement at the company. Probably everyone who was alive in 1991 remembers Unbelievable by EMF with its techno-inspired indie dance hooks and Andrew Dice Clay samples. The album which generated the single had some sweet Ave Maria in a way. What was that title of the 1991 EMF album? That is Schubert Dip, Schubert being the composer of Ave Maria, and a sherbet dip being a British sweet similar to Fun Dip in the US. So I'm just going to take a quick moment ahead of this episode to remind you that I and many other podcast listeners first heard about Press Gang via the Last Word podcast with Chris and Illyrio, in which Chris led Illyrio through the series episode by episode, with tons of expert detail including some identification of locations and other interesting things. It's my opinion that their show was vastly superior to the meager offering that I am presenting. With any luck, I will surpass them in only one way. I intend not to podfade before I finish the show. I mean, no shade in mentioning that their last episode published 9 years ago this week, with Series 2, Episode 12. As it happens, I have a podcast series called Idjitcast languishing with no sign of continuation myself, so I can relate. I mentioned when I got started on this that I communicated with Chris prior to getting started, not so much to ask permission, but to let him know that I was getting underway. I may have still continued with my plan if his reply was, I'd rather you didn't, and might have decided against it if he said, don't you dare, you filthy yank sod. But as luck would have it, the reply was cordial and ended with, go for it, man, so here we are. I pretty much said this all on episode 1, but I figured there were enough Dog Days audience who may have been familiar with the other show. All that said, for most of the first 2 series, you'll find more complete information over there, and with any luck, they will one day revive their show at some point. So let's get a look at Press Gang, Series 1, Episode 4, Deadline, originally aired Monday, February 6, 1989. That day of note, this was the first day of the so-called Round Table Talks between the Communist Polish government and the Solidarity Trade Union, including head Lech Wałęsa. The agreements forged in these talks led to the country's first free and fair election since 1928, electing a new Polish parliament in June. Eventually, Wałęsa would be elected the first non-communist president of Poland in 1990. The UK singles chart for the week, ending February 11th, 1989, showed little change of top tracks, only the 4 and 5 switched places. Number 5, Cuddly Toy by Roachford. Number 4, Love Train by Holly Johnson. Number 3, You Got It by Roy Orbison. Number 2, The Living Years by Mike and the Mechanics. And the number 1 for the week again, Something's Gotten Hold of My Heart by Mark Almond featuring Gene Pitney. As I stated last time, I'm looking at the Billboard Modern Rock singles chart as it was primarily what I was listening to at the time. Number 5 was Sweet Jane by the Cowboy Junkies. Number 4, Dear God by Midge Ure. Number 3, Minnesota band The Replacements with I'll Be You, up from number 12 the previous week and in its second week of release. The number 2 song was Stand by R.E.M., switching places from number 1 this week with Dirty Boulevard by Lou Reed. So, a brief summary of this episode. The main premise of the episode is there is a printer's strike about to go into effect, but the printers have agreed to do a small run of the Junior Gazette's next issue, but only if they can write next week's newspaper in 3 hours' time. There are all manner of obstacles, from a 101 tabbies situation to a football match that won't be played for days. Call-in reveals they won't be able to pay for the edition in the first place, as the ad they have scheduled, which would pay for the expenses, requires a photo of a local celebrity at a shop opening that won't occur until the next day. Plus, Sarah has gone out on a hot date and refuses to return to the paper to write her story. So Linda has to track down Mr. Sullivan to do a story on his trouble with a sewer leak in his garden. Colin has to contrive a way to get his photo. They play out a possible football match using tiddlywinks, and Julie reveals to Sarah her date keeps a notebook rating all the girls in the school, invited her as last resort for her date, plus only rated her a 4 out of 10, which spurs her to reject him and then write the needed article on toilet paper while locked in the bathroom at the party. So there's lots and lots of jokes packed into this show, but my favorite line that I'm picking this time is...
It's crazy. Spike, how am I supposed to do the horoscopes a week in advance, huh?
Well, why not? You never really predict anything anyway. Just make it up.
Yeah, right. So how do I predict what I'll make up in a week's time?
So this episode, I'm briefly going to look at Paul Reynolds, who plays Colin Matthews. Paul Reynolds was born in 1970 in Wanstead in East London. He got his acting education from the Sylvia Young Theatre School on Drury Lane. When he was 12, he had a part in the Beastmaster film and performed in various theatre and television roles until his breakout role on Press Gang. Aside from the 2 romantic leads, he is the only other cast member to appear in all 43 episodes. Though he has steadily worked acting in 2 or 3 productions a year, according to IMDb, he has also taken time to begin his own production company as well. He has continued stage work along with the credits that are listed on IMDb. He's done cameos for former Press Gang castmates, appearing once on Absolutely Fabulous when Julia Swallow was on there, and also a couple of times on Lark Rise to Candleford, also with Julia. I get the general impression that he's mostly taking roles that amuse him or as favors at this point. The last time I spotted him was in Eddie the Eagle, the film about the plucky but not very good English ski jumper that won everybody's hearts back in the 1988 Calgary Winter Olympics. Paul played, of all things, a reporter, and if you weren't aware, the director of Eddie the Eagle was Dexter Fletcher. Alright, this aged poorly. I'll try to keep this light and non-triggering, but Spike makes a joke about Sarah's low mood about finding out about her date's status as a player. His joke was rather graphic reference to self-harm that would never fly in today's media, especially in a show targeted for a youth audience. So what worked? The pacing continues to be a real standout. Jokes, whether lame or clever, are stacked up on one another in such a way that you eventually are going to hit something that amuses you. I really enjoyed Mr. Sullivan in this episode. He had some great scenes with both Kenny and Linda, and I'll need to do a Who Is on Nick Stringer in the near future. What didn't work? Well, the number of obstacles to overcome definitely feels contrived a bit, but of course that only enhances the pace for what worked. The Gary Morris character as Sarah's hot date was written to be insufferable, but I think they went a little bit overboard. So the next Press Gang episode will be Series 1, Episode 5, A Night In, which will be paired in tandem with Seeing Things Once More. But for now, let's get you some fresh trivia questions, which have you investigating another organ and then potentially reminiscing over past candy yumminess. Okay, check out that organ. The Charlatans were a British band that had to append UK on the end of the band name in the US. They were associated with the Manchester scene, but were in fact from Birmingham. Their debut single, off their Between 10th and 11th, attacks you with the organ from the first moment of the song. What is that single called? And then take a shot at naming this spheroid candy product marketed with Simpsons characters, which was introduced in 1992. And those are the questions of the day. This is the Dog Days of Trivia on the One Idjit's Thoughts On podcast, and I wish you happy hunting.